Thanks for joining us this morning. Hope you've all enjoyed your summer. After the August lull, we are definitely back in full swing. So we have 6 or 7 webinars and an in-person event coming up over the next few weeks. So do check out the event page for details. So today I'm very excited to say we have Steffie from Bright Green Futures with us. She's passionate about creating super low carbon communities. Her mission is to put people and planet at the core of housing. And for what it's worth, I'm extremely impressed with her business model and vision and mission, but you'll be able to judge for yourselves very shortly. Firstly, though, just like to cover off some admin as usual. If you can, leave your microphones on mute, not necessarily throughout the presentation, but just for the first part whilst Steffie is going to be talking. I will enable the chat so you can ask any questions. You can ask any questions within the chat facility. We do want you to be as involved as always. So just bear with me 1 second. Obviously we would like you guys to be as involved as much as possible. So in a moment, I'll probably ask you to introduce yourselves within the chat facilities, say hi, where you work, who you are, and why you've joined this particular session. The session is being recorded and we will upload it both to the Meshwork itself and to Mesh Energy's YouTube channel. So without any further, sorry, 2 seconds there, just another couple of things. So I should say, I can tell from the invite list that everyone, apart from one person, has been on Meshwork for a little while. So you know what Meshwork's about. We're thankful that you've joined us. What I would say is, if you could get involved as much as possible, that would be great. If you could share anything, share any great suppliers, share any tips and works and any events that you guys have found out about, just, please upload anything you'd like to the platform, because, we're all here to create, better buildings and learn from each other. We do have a number of these events, as I've said, so do check out the events page. I'm just meeting someone now. And it would be great to see as much chat as possible and interaction. So before I ask Steffie just to introduce herself and just present, Meshwork was set up by Mesh Energy, and Mesh Energy is an independent energy consultant. And their mission is to instill confidence and pride in low energy projects through intelligent design, and we can help you in a number of ways, as it says here. So do get in touch with Doug and the team at Mesh if need be. So as I said, if you could use the chat facility, it is enabled. Introduce yourselves, say hello, tell us where you're from. Steffie's going to talk for around about 20-25 minutes, and at the end, so I've allowed up to an hour for this particular session. So we have plenty of time for Q&A. It's, as I said before, the model is fantastic, so I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, and we'll take it from there. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, Steffie, so then I'll not allow is the wrong word, and it will enable you to share yours. So I'll just hand over to you. So I've stopped sharing. Yeah.
Great. Hello. Let me share my screen then. Can you all see that? Great. Okay, yeah, so I'm Steffie, and Bright Green Futures is my company, and we wanted to, the idea was, and I'll talk to you about Water Lilies. It's a zero carbon, self and custom built community we're building in Bristol. And yes, so I was talking to Simon to see what might interest you most. I'll be talking a little bit about the business model and the project itself first, and then about the community side, how we involve the future community in this decisions making of the scheme and how that has contributed to the sustainability achievements. Now I'll talk about the sustainability technology we've used and the constraints and opportunities, like the problems we face and how we solve them, and some recommendations. So I was wondering, because I could spend quite a lot of time on each of those. So I wondered what you were most interested in. And I thought, oh, sorry, this is going too fast. If you are you could put in a chat box one if you're most interested in the development concept and the business model itself. You could put 2 if you're most interested in the community aspects, 3 if you're most interested in the sustainability technology, and 4 if you're most interested in the problems we face and how we solve them. And then I can sort of spend more time on those things that you're most interested in, basically. So yeah, if you want to put 1 for the model, 2 for community, 3 for sustainable technology, and 4 for problems and solutions.
Well, we've got a mixed bag. We've got 1, 2, and 4 at the moment.
Okay. I can't actually see it. I was going to say,
oh, okay.
Maybe let me know. Well, if it's
I think as Ruby says, it all sounds interesting. So if we
that's good. I'll talk about everything then. I'll try to get through this in 20 minutes, and then you can ask questions, so we can go more into what you want. Yeah, so Water Lilies is a community in Bristol, and it's 33 self and custom built zero carbon homes and a community hub. And I think we're one of 2 companies who've managed to do self-built houses in terraces. So they're self-finished. So we built the shell of the houses, the 21 houses, and the customers doing their own fit out. The flats, we have 12 flats, they were custom built. So we built it to the specification of the customers. There's a shared garden in the middle, and an underground car park and bicycle park, and a whole waste and recycling area. And it was financed through equity finance to purchase the land, and then through self-built mortgages of the customers, and a development loan for the flats. It's a site in Bristol. I don't know if any of you know Bristol, but it's a little bit on the outskirts towards Avonmouth, so towards the estuary, in quite a deprived area, actually. And so we got the land for a good price because it is a brownfield site in a deprived area. But the site is also quite special because it's got amazing views over the estuaries on a slope. And it's got woodland at the back and quite linked into quite a big nature reserve. And it enabled us to do, 33 homes development with quite a small amount of equity. In a conventional way, we would have needed 3 times as much equity to do it because the land was low cost, and because the self-builders are getting a self-built mortgage and buying their plot. We were dealing with this old reservoir on this site, and you can see a picture of people being inside the reservoir. And what we thought we'd do is, actually I'll go back, is where the shared garden is, that is actually sitting on top of the reservoir. So we parked the cars in the garden, in the reservoir, and we put a lid on top and put the shared garden and the community hub on top, and all the houses are then arranged around the garden square. And it creates the nice car-free place for to play. So that's something I'm using for the kids, and it's also really great for the parents, because it's just so safe and easy, and the kids have got all these, very inspiring people there living around, who all came together to build a beautiful community. And live in line with their principles of caring for the planet as well as the people around them. We wanted to not only involve the future community, but also the existing community. So we worked, we did quite a lot of community consultation, and in the end, we had 95% letters of support. And this was a site that had a planning permission already before that the whole community was against. So that was a good achievement. Yes, we then had a small group of people who bought in at the very start before we applied for planning permission. They put a small deposit down for the right to then purchase their house once we got planning permission. And that was great because the whole design was very much influenced by the people who were going to live there. We had a budget for community features, and they said they'd picked up that should be spent in a community hub, which has then allows for shared washing machines and just a shared place for people to come together and work together. Then all the customers had sessions as part of their package with the architect to design their bespoke home. We had a master plan, so we said pick a shape and a size that is right for you and that you can afford, and you can do with it on the inside what you want. But all the people who bought in pre-planning and pre-building as well, because we put some minor amendments through for people who bought in just after we got planning permission before we started building, were then also able to adjust their windows to basically, for passive house design, for views. And so the windows were tied up with what they were doing on the internal. And then they fit them out themselves with their own contractors and through DIY, or often a combination of that. So they have a lot of choice then on the inside. So there's some of our customers in and outside of the pandemic in the shell of their homes. With the flats, because nobody was offering self-built mortgages for flats at the time, we had to take them to completion, but we still let the customers specify what they wanted on the inside. That, I should say, has now changed. I think BuildStore is now working with lenders who are offering self-built and custom-built mortgages to customers as well, which actually could make financing easier, because we had to finance the flats through a conventional development model, because the customers could only pay for them at the very end. We had an internal design code to make sure we didn't want each house to look completely different and it's too hard to build. So we have white render, we have ideal combi windows that are triple glazed to the north and double glazed to the south, but they're very good double and triple glazing. And we have this galvanized, we picked these galvanized roofs that look quite cool, that the architect really likes. These kind of metal roofs, and you can see how, when you look, this is the elevations, these are the elevations of the terraces. Each house looks different, but I think they look quite nice. There's like a coherence because of the shape and the materials we specify, that even though, and on the inside now, like half the people have moved in and finished their houses, and they're all completely different and very creative. It's really nice to see how our customers have thrown themselves into getting their house right. We have workshops with the customers where we teach them about how to design a sustainable home and about the technology and how to design their homes in general. We have had this idea of lifetime homes. I know there's a lifetime homes standard, but for us, it's more by letting people design their home from the start and guiding them to think through how they might want to live in their home if they were going to be there for their whole life, maybe even if they were going to pass their home on to their children. How could that house evolve over time? And about 2/3 of the houses, the shells were designed in a way that the ground floor could be a self-contained space, so it could be rented out. It could be a granny annex, it could be a workspace, it could be, the teenager could move into it when they need more space. So depending on the financial needs of the customers over time and the space needs, the house can sort of grow and shrink and adapt, really. Then when the pandemic started, we put all these workshops online, and we have since actually kept quite a few of them online. So we get together face to face more as a social. And yeah, that was also, I think, something to keep everyone going through the pandemic. And you can actually, I think this picture kind of shows a little bit what community means to our customers, and how we were already a community. We're already a community, even though the project isn't completed. I think that there is a lot to be said about the sustainability achievements that the social network creates in itself. So we have measured, for example, travel patterns in another community that I was involved with. What happens when and what happens when people build their own house? They also become more entrepreneurial, and they can put design their workspace into their house. So there's a lot more home working that happens in these communities, and there is just a buzz around the sustainability and working out how we do it. And then combined with, having your social space, your community garden and your community hub right on your doorstep, and having the really good recycling facilities as well, so you don't have to keep all your waste in your house until recycling day. All these things make a massive difference, and I think that's what my PhD was about. That you can double the amount by which you can reduce the carbon footprint of the person in comparison to moving them into a zero carbon home from a typical UK home. So that's why that was also really important, not just about changing people's lives and allowing them to live in this way, but also really pushing the carbon footprint further. So yeah, here's a picture of what it's going to look like. So you can see the community hub opening into the garden. That's that green building on the left, and the terraces opening into the garden. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about the second bit, which is about the sustainability technology. So we went with passive house design principles. I think we didn't do the certificate because it's very expensive, and I think not every house achieved it, because there was also a balancing act of letting them put the windows where they wanted to, and an affordability thing of how far are we going to go about modeling everything. And there's a lot of time put into the managing the whole community, as you can imagine. But I think probably the most innovative thing is the microgrid we have. So we have a Tesla battery, and that was also a Bristol startup who put that in. So with the PV and the air source heat pumps and the MVHR and draft proofing and higher U values, low U values, we then get to zero carbon. So, reducing obviously first and then generating the rest on site. I've talked about facilitating lifestyles actually, so I won't mention that again. This is a little schematic of the microgrid. So what happens is that the energy generated on site can be shared on site. Each PV feeds straight into the microgrid. So the customers sell it to the microgrid community company and then purchase electricity back. And there's some smart energy in there as well, in that the microgrid company can also, we have these air source heat pumps, I think, that can work on smart energy to reduce the stress on the national grid. That was all delivered by Bristol startup company, and the customers in 7 years get the right to buy out the company. We didn't do that at the start because they've all maximized their finances to afford their home, but that's something they could do at a later date. Obviously, with everything going on with the energy crisis, it just feels so good. And at the moment, the customers are paying 12 pence per kilowatt hour. Until March, that was guaranteed. And then the prices will be a lot lower than everyone else as well, because, by and large, the energy is generated on site. And I think you often, the argument is always, oh, we can't afford it, it's not viable, but you just future-proof, and all of a sudden, looking ahead shows it's more viable. So we have actually faced a load of challenges, and you probe me and ask me some more. I'm just going to talk about a few, but I think that's probably, if I talk about our fuck ups, that's the best learning, really. So one thing that was one challenge we faced during the planning process was the community infrastructure levy. So self and custom builds are exempt from paying the community infrastructure levy, which actually makes a big difference to the finances. But the customer has to fill out the initial forms before you have started on the ground on that plot. And then also we were told initially that if you built in terrace, like if one customer wasn't going to live in their house for 3 years, which is what, you would need to pay the levy at self-build. They define that the person who's building their home or taking ownership needs to live there at least for at least 3 years. So if one person was going to move, then the levy would be payable by everyone. We got actually a solicitor involved at this stage, and he argued that you could actually call every single house a phase. So the local authority then agreed that we could get SIL exemption on every home. It just meant we had to actually have a buyer for each home before we started building, which is a challenge when you need to build one terrace together, or it's much more expensive if you wanted to wait. Luckily, we had a lot of demand, so actually we got the SIL exemption for nearly all of the houses. I think there were maybe 5 left we hadn't sold when we were hitting ground. Another big challenge was the site constraints of there's only one way in. Here's the site from the top. There's only a small because at the end of the cul-de-sac to come into the site was difficult, and then to bring all the self-builders in. So we had to work out how it works, because the main contractor said our insurance doesn't cover loads of people who walk through our sites. So as we were handing over the houses, they're coming in from a separate entrance, and what's been handed over is fenced off. And then we had to work with the deliveries on a constrained site. I think the solution is, I would say, the solution is actually just cooperating. Have a contractor you can cooperate with, and and just find solutions as you go. Also think it through at the start how it's going to work, because I think one of the things we've really learned is to really plan ahead all of these aspects. And before you go into contract, you've clarified a lot of those things, because luckily we get on really well with our contractor. So we've managed to work through all those challenges, but it will de-risk it if you can think it through a lot more in advance. And solid legal agreements. So I think it's really important that the contract with the main contractor and your customer contracts work together. So you're passing on what you've promised to your customer in terms of what is going to be billed to the contractor. And I would even say I would leave a little bit more leeway than we have. So because with the customers, I mean, I think Simon says that a lot of you are architects, so you will know this better than we learned it the hard way with the team. It's always better if you've promised the customers less and you can do a bit more than you plan to do a bit more, but it gives you basically the option to say, actually, we're not contractually obliged to do this if a customer becomes difficult and asks for too much. Yeah, that actually ties into dealing with customers. So the customers, it's in some ways it's really good. We made them all talk to each other, but then they become a very strong group and they keep us on our toes, and they help to keep the construction high quality as well. But yeah, some of them get stressed as they're going through their self-build. A lot of them have their finances get really stretched and they witness the build problem. So that's different to selling the house at the end when you've solved all the problems. So they're going through that whole journey with you. And I mean, we faced a lot of problems because we had massive delays as a result of COVID and Brexit, and the customers were paying their mortgages, and we were the middle company. We didn't have that much control over our contractor as we would have if we had built in-house, but I'm glad we didn't, because it would have been too much for us to manage that as well. I think a lot of customer care is good, just keep it positive and loving, and sometimes they just need to be able to speak to someone. They get mentoring sessions with an architect with us. We do the workshops. We then started doing Q&A sessions every fortnight, and they can come and ask questions, and then just builds customers confident that if something has gone wrong, they're not worried because they are hearing how we're solving it. And it was important actually to have either the contract administrator or the architect answering those questions, because they could answer them a lot better than people in my team. Yeah, I think, as I said, the tight legal agreements are really good. Our contractor was really stretched with the complexity of the project. Every house different. The microgrid, they weren't used to building to passive house principles. And then we had the subcontractors were walking off because of Brexit. There was so much building work everywhere. And I think the solution was really, and then we had the similar issue with the microgrid contractor, who was pretty much trying to sort out this microgrid on his own. So the solution was really in cooperating and trying to find solutions and trying to help them. So I seconded one of my team members to work for the microgrid startup, so that she basically went to manage the company and sort everything out for them. So she was working with them for 3 months, and then that was all sorted. But yeah, we had the challenge of so much innovation, and then having to take the customers with us through this whole journey. So I think there's something about choosing your battles as well, choosing how much you want to take on, but also knowing, even if you're in the perfect storm, there will be a solution. And what I would say, a project like this has attracted so many amazing people who all wanted to work. I think for me it was quite hard at times because, you know, at one point all the customers were struggling and were upset, and the customer representatives in the team were getting upset as well. And then they were like, oh, maybe we should have never done this. And if you have worked with a self-builder, you know, maybe you know that that is something that is quite normal on a self-build journey and amplified when there's a whole group. But I found it quite hard, and I kept saying everybody's going to love it, and this is so great what we're doing. And now this is what everyone's moved in, is saying that, and it's really so grateful, and the customers are so happy. But I think never having gone through that, I mean, I would be okay to do it second time because I know it, but I think there's a lot. It's really good also to have self-care, and you know, and to think about how to nurture yourself if you're going through the challenges of a big project like this. Yeah, then I think in terms of achieving build quality and sustainability, you know, when your contractor is really stretched financially, is not used to the quality, there's been so much pressure on cutting corners. And so I think it's really important to have the air pressure targets in the contract, and the U values. And sometimes I have budged as well on some things because, you know, it's really then practical and get to a solution. But I think it's important to have the contract right, and not to be afraid of saying, no, you know, this is what we've come together for, and we are going to have a community hub, and we are going to achieve these targets. But the other thing is also, which you probably know more than me about, to talk to the contractors early on to say what can go wrong with the air tightness, and that is going to be much more expensive to sort it out at the end. And patience and persistence, I think, has been the main thing, and accepting that it's not always going to go the way you want to, and that there's always a solution. Yeah, then in terms of recommendations, I think I've already said a little bit: choose your battles right, get contracts and processes right from the start. Excellent people in the key positions. So the contract administrator, we swapped him halfway through the project, which wasn't great, but now we have got someone who's really amazing. And same with the lead architect. That's really important, and I think I wouldn't skim on those positions now, but also you might not have to pay that much more because there's so many people who would love to do this kind of thing. We had quite a lot of directors of companies who offered themselves on a graduate rate because they wanted to work on this project. And I think it's really good if you do a project like this to have someone on your side who's done something similar again. And that's kind of something we in Brightly Features want to branch into as well now, because I would love to see this sort of project scalable and more projects like this going up, because, you know, it's so much better on all levels for the customers, for the planet, and for the beauty and the quality. So we are quite keen to develop a support service. So if you thinking about doing something similar and you wanted some advice, please get in touch with me. I think what was really great about pushing this sustainability, what I would recommend if you want to push the sustainability further, is this option to do self-build in terraces, so where the customer gets the involvement, the bigger affordability because they can build it themselves, and you make it possible for people to self-build on lower budgets as well, and you create that kind of community. And I think my other big recommendation, if you want to push sustainability, is to combine it with enabling these sustainable lifestyles and the buy-in of customers through being able to take them on the journey with you throughout the build process. You could do you could do a mixture as well. So you do some half self and custom build and half building houses to finish, or that was our backup plan, but we sold everything. Because there will also be people who are really into sustainability, but who would rather have a finished house. So you could mix it a bit, and balance your risk that way too. That is my presentation. So yeah, I'm very happy to receive any questions.
Thank you very much, Steffie. Fantastic. Really, really interesting. Yeah, I don't know where to start really. Guys, I mean, are you aware of, you mentioned you're aware of one other development that had been built in terraces. Are you aware of any other companies copying this model or adopting this model in the UK?
It's Igloo Regeneration. They've done a terrace, and there's another 4 people who've tried it, but they didn't get it off the ground.
Right.
And I think I didn't talk about our sales journey. I think we also innovated in the way we sold it. So I think it's because of that, or because of the model, I don't know, that we've been able to make it work.
Yeah.
And also because we did say, if we can't sell them all, we're happy to build some of them finished. And we, as I said, we didn't get the silver for all of them. We had a few left, and we were just happy we had this flexible model where we could do either. Yeah.
Okay. And how many people actually chose to self-build internally as opposed to, the contractor doing? Because when you said you got contractors coming in and self-builders, was every plot finished by a self-builder?
Yeah, I mean, if I say the definition of self-build is you're kind of in charge, doesn't mean you have to build yourself.
Okay, so
I think, yeah, all of our customers have contractors involved, and the majority are getting most of it built by a contractor.
Yeah.
And there are a few, maybe a third, who are also doing quite a bit of DIY.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. And in terms of self-build, addressing the housing situation, what needs to be done? What steps need to be taken in order? I'm assuming the availability of land is the biggest issue for self-builders. I mean, what can be done to improve that situation and compete against the national house builders in terms of security?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, it is changing. There's a big political push for self and custom build. And there's a help to build, so help to buy is being replaced by help to build. So you can build with a 5% deposit and get a 20% equity contribution, which makes it, makes self and custom build more financially competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And local authorities all need to meet the targets on the register, and they don't really know how to do it. So I'm talking to landowners now with land that you probably wouldn't get planning permission on.
Yeah.
But you probably get it for self and custom build. What I'm annoyed about is that they didn't line up that agenda with the sustainability agenda. So there's a big push, but it's from these self-built house builders like Potton, and it's going to end up. The danger is that it's going to end up in lots of detached self-built homes. Now, a lot of self-built homes are more sustainable because self-builders tend to be into that much more. But, you're forgetting a large section of the population. You can't add community benefits. And I think we've got an edge here, because I think if you go into if you apply for planning permission, you're saying it's self and custom built, but it's also zero carbon, and it's a co-housing or community project, then you've got a much better chance of getting planning permission.
Yeah.
And then sometimes some local authorities have said 5% self and custom build on every project. Sometimes developers, like this company, came to me because they are buying a site that had to have 30% contribution from self and custom build, and people applied for planning, put that in because they thought they have a better chance of getting planning permission. So there is a big political push coming actually for that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, well, there should be. I mean, publicly owned land buildings should be. You would have thought the local authorities would make that available firstly to self-builders anyway, over and above just a big developer. It just seems a quick win to solve this issue. So just a naive question from my perspective. So terraces are more sustainable than you can build a terrace more sustainably than you can detached houses. Just obvious, really. And in terms of the you mentioned one thing about the shared space on the left there, about having even just a laundry area. Do these houses, and it comes to the lifestyle, so you're making people's carbon footprint is improved because of the lifestyle they're going to be leading through living in such a community like this. Do they have their own washing machine in their own houses? Can they choose to do that, or people just would rather not?
Yeah, do you know, actually there was a big push of them wanting their own washing machines, even in the small flats.
Right.
And partly it was a problem now because the community hub, because of the way the site has to be built at the end.
Yeah.
But still good. I mean, it's maybe not so much of an environmental benefit, but there's still a benefit if your washing machine breaks. There's another one, you can use.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, some people think, oh, community is like commune, but actually it's not. Everybody still has their own house. They all have a private garden. So they just have the community aspects in addition. And I find living in community, I actually get more privacy, with kids, because there's always something to do. Or if you've got a couple, one is very private and one is very sociable, you can both have more of your preference, because you don't need to be sociable together because there's neighbors on the doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can acoustically insulate their houses really well. So
I mean, you touched on something there, sort of with more community could be seen to be a commune, but it's not. I mean, what you've done is you go around to any development, any cul-de-sac in any town, any city, and you are all living closely together. In those instances, people are living closely together in water lilies, but they've shared the whole journey from the start to the end. And just because they've done that doesn't mean that they're going to be living in a commune, and they're not spending in it every hour, every minute together. It's just you're more likely to have the sense of a community from the journey that they've gone through, and all of the common goals to make it sustainable.
I think it's more like a lovely neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like often, a lot of people live in places and there's an awful neighbor, and they're cutting themselves off the neighborhood. But it's so nice because it attracts like-minded people, interesting people. And so, I mean, especially for me, when I had small children and then I was single parent, it's so helpful if your friends are on your doorstep and you don't have to get in the car to see your friends, or you're arranging dinner like a week in advance. But because I don't know if on Wednesday night I'm going to be too tired and I just want to be at home, or actually I'd like to invite some friends. So you can just be a lot more spontaneous in that way.
No, definitely. Guys, if there's any questions you'd like to ask, then please raise your hand or put something in chat. I mean, am I right in saying that this is the only development that's been sort of A-rated in Bristol? And if so, you've done it. How can others, developers, find it such a challenge to not achieve that? I mean, what gave you the edge to be able to deliver on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, we built one development before which was A-rated, and I don't think there are any other A-rated homes in Bristol, not that I've heard.
But you haven't done anything that's like mind-blowingly. I mean, it's all innovative, but it's not. It's all achievable.
Yeah, and we've done it. Well, we've done it profitably. When we did the courtyard, they built Hannam Hall, which was the eco town in Bristol. I think there were 5 eco towns around the country, and that was supposed to be 500 A-rated homes. And Barrett built that. And I went to see it, and they said, yeah, we built 3 houses first, to try it out and to make a loss on, and then we were going to build the other ones. But they only got to 40% carbon emission reduction, like code for sustainable homes level 4. I think I actually think, what is it? I think it's just the attitude, and for them, it's all about profit. Or maybe we can do a bit of sustainability, but if it costs too much, we'll go back and say, can we do less? It's, yeah, I mean, maybe it's my own stubbornness.
Yeah.
I get hit with it all the time of, can we, we don't achieve the air pressure target. Can we let that one go, Steffi? Even like the whole team, everybody has an interest of just less work not to do it. Yeah. Or in another project I set up, I sold it to a community group because they wanted to do it themselves. I was still involved. And as soon as the finances got difficult, and that's a community group, that's not even a profit-driven developer, then like they get rid of the community hub, then they get rid of the solar panels. Yeah. So it's like when it gets difficult, don't just hide away when it's difficult, but, just see it through, because it's worth it in the end.
So did they go over budget then, some of these? I mean, did people have varying, I suppose they had varying budgets because everyone kitted out their homes differently, but by and large, did they come in on budget then? And presumably the cost of the land and the build was a lot less than the future value of this finished house. Yeah,
I mean, they didn't come in, they went over budget like construction projects do. Yeah. And especially with what's happening in the market at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, they will be worth a lot more than what people paid for them. We just said, when people were buying in, the community hub was already allocated for, and that was part of their package that they bought.
Yeah.
Of course, the downside is there's not a lot of people were really excited, and not everybody could afford it. And maybe that's another recommendation to make, is like, don't beat yourself up. You can't achieve a utopia. You do what you can.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's interesting, actually, once you do something so out there, you actually also get criticized from within the environmental scene of, oh, why are your houses not more affordable? And so, I mean, I think for me, the main thing was to really have thought everything through. And in the end, I had an answer to everything. I was like, yeah, because actually we had to make a choice between really high quality and more cost at the start, and the lifetime, minimizing the lifetime costs. And
yeah,
I can't solve all the world's problems in one go. So once you have an answer, actually, then I think people find you credible and respect that as well.
Yeah, and there's room for people to come in and do different types of developments as well, to address the initial costs, I suppose. Like you say, there's especially the chat within Meshwork, a lot of the problems and questions that are being asked and answered, they are really addressing a market that is in a position who can afford to think about sustainability. I suppose in this instance, you're building houses with people who could afford to build this type of sustainable house. It's not like, say, you're not trying to solve every problem, but it's fantastic. You started something, and other people should pick up on it. And I do see it as a solution for the housing requirements. I mean, and hopefully land will become more available, and people will adopt more of your processes and practices. Conscious of the time, I'm conscious that I've asked all the questions as well, and I get bored of hearing my own Mockney voice as well. So if anyone, Virgendra has just asked a question regarding EVC installation. How do residents pay for the EVC in the communal car park?
Oh yeah, so they are also run by the microgrid provider. And the microgrid provider has to, so even though obviously over time they can't guarantee a cost, but it has to be below the local average. I don't know exact wording in the contract, but you know, it's capped so that it is competitive. And he's charging a little bit more for the EV charging than for the electricity in the houses to make his model work. But yeah, and that's how it works. So it was, I think the other way is you could run a cable from each house to that charging point. But we also, what we said in the car park, everybody, or the one thing we did, we said 12K for parking place, so that people who didn't want a car actually, you know, got a financial reward. We also said that if somebody had mobility issues, they get a prioritized location of their parking place. And obviously that can change because somebody could end up in a wheelchair in the future. So that also makes it then difficult to say, to put all the wires in, and that would be too many wires. So it's one network. We've got, I think, 10 charging points, and we can then add more charging points as people get more electric cars.
Cool. I think actually a conversation for us with a microgrid installer supplier would be interesting. Actually, it'd be interesting to see. They're clearly not just reliant on community-led cooperative developments like yourself. I mean, where else are they pushing these microgrids out?
So they are doing another one. Oh, sorry, you just broke up. They were doing another microgrid with, I think, Bridport co-housing.
Right.
And they did a community centre in Bristol. So it's interesting. I think it's these sort of community groups, you know, that are actually interested and up for doing something like that.
Yes.
Whereas the conventional developers, you know, they were just, sadly.
They're not under pressure to do anything otherwise at the moment, are they? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are regulations and coming down the line, and obviously we have the goals with net zero, but yeah, at the moment they're still they can still do pretty much what they want to do. Cool. Okay, and I'm conscious of the time. Thank you very much, Steffie. Does anyone else have any other questions? If not, then I'll thank Steffie for her time and your time. And yeah, I will send out the CPD certificates later today or tomorrow. I'll upload the recording, which, well, you've seen it, but I'll share it to the other guys, the many people who haven't seen it. Thanks for your time. Check out our events page. We have another webinar next week. And yeah, Steffie, thank you very much again. I'll speak to you soon.
No worries. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.